Now, what I was going to talk about is my first assertion, and that's from this week, Tuesday's new paper, and I'm not sure it was in papers down here, but in the Cedar Rapids Gazette. Fight going on over cage-free eggs. You know about this? Well, California passed a law that said we want to sell cage-free eggs, and if you want to sell into the state, you have to abide by our rules. Our response in Iowa was then to pass a law that said, it's House File 2408, to protect conventional caged chicken industry. The law was signed last month, and this is Tuesday's paper, so last month would be March, by Governor Kim Reynolds, and it requires any grocery store participating in the federal food program, like the WIC program. If they sell cage-free eggs, they have to sell conventional eggs. They have to. Conventional eggs raised in these cages. And the Grocery Association saying, what about the free market? I mean, I thought you guys were Republicans. I thought you thought that the market was...
You mean they can't sell truly cage-free chicken eggs?
They have to sell both.
Oh, I see.
They have to sell, if they sell one, they have to sell the other.
Oh, I see.
Which, you know, and if I don't know what happens in a farmer's market. If the farmer's market has WIC availability, why would they ever want to? How would anybody ever want to try to sell those kind of eggs? But the point is, there's a point being made here. Second one is that I don't know if you know about the Ag-Gag law. Ag-Gag law passed in 2012 in Iowa. First state, the number of passed it, said that if you go into an animal production facility or a slaughtering house or something, and you get in there and you actually work with PETA or the Humane Society, somebody like that, you go in to take, with a camera that size, to try to take pictures and show abuses. You come out and show those abuses to the authorities, and they arrest you and put you in jail.
Yeah.
That's the Ag-Gag law, that you cannot divulge that, or you're somehow hurting the producer. Federal judge in 2015 crushed that law in Idaho. Oh. It has not yet come down in here in the state, although, and here it is, judge strikes down Idaho Ag-Gag law, and that was in 2015. It's now gone to the appeals court. And I'm not the 10th district. I think, again...
The poor corporations who have been truly wronged are appealing this decision.
They are appealing this, and of course, the same thing. This is the First Amendment, and we kind of think that's an important one.
Makes me wonder about the little stores on the way up between here and Kelowna.
Sure.
Who are selling their cage-free eggs.
And if they had... But again, if they're taking WIC. See, that's the tie.
Here's an idea that they could use, is that they could buy one egg that's a caged, you know, the kind of, and they could price it at $100, and it's just sitting on the table.
And it would sit there a long time.
I would.
Yes,
no doubt.
Even if it was priced at $1, it would probably sit there a long time.
And it's you know, interesting. Again, this is the article, and conventional egg producers claim that this is an important piece. And they're the ones that are showing that a chicken actually has this much room. Mm-hmm. That's how much room is given to a chicken. Mm-hmm. And but it's DeCoster. Huge egg recall out of DeCoster.
Millions. Many millions.
Yeah.
They produce over 1 million eggs a day.
Oh yeah, I think there were millions. But you know, this Austin DeCoster has always been a bad actor, and they just blamed him, and the conventional is just fine. But the point here's the third one of these. 1 year ago, March 2017, the Iowa legislature passed a law that said if you are aggrieved by your neighbor, and that neighbor happens to be a confined animal feeding operation, you are limited in what you can collect and how you can run your case. It doesn't say you can't. They knew that would be overturned. But time and again, the legislature makes this decision. The industry has told us there's only one way to produce chicken eggs or, do a CAFO. There's only one way. And if you don't like it, then you are anti-agriculture. And they also say this is an urban, rural area, and these urban people just do not understand. It's rural people who are doing the nuisance suits because by definition they live next door. So, only one way to do things, and the industry decides that. And there are so many different ways of growing hogs. The way I get mine from 4 miles away, farrow it in the field. I know the farmer. A lot of people do that. And but large scale is very, very different. In Denmark, they have got rid of and many antibiotics, all the growth-promoting antibiotics. They are really worried about antibiotic resistance, as we should be really scared about it. But they have limits on how long a sow can be in one of these gestation crates. The fact that animals have the right to root around and act like animals. All those requirements were put down in Denmark, and the industry expanded by about 30%. So it's clearly...
What do you mean?
There are 30% more hogs being produced in Denmark than there were before the law.
Does that mean there was more demand, or it was just easier to do it?
Oh, probably because of demand. But the point is, that did not stop the industry from expanding.
Right.
And I don't know, maybe the Russian market opened, I don't know the reasons, but it expanded with those kind of protections for neighbors, for the environment, and for the animals themselves. So the notion that we somehow have one technology, and if you don't like it, the hell with you, or we will change our law in order to make the industry do exactly what it wants to, is the reason we have so much trouble with this issue. This is a contentious issue. Everybody knows it's contentious, and the legislature continually says, whatever the industry wants, that's what we want.
Would you do me a favor and say, define we, and actually introduce yourself?
Oh, sure. My name is David Osterberg. I'm an emeritus, as I said, emeritus professor at the University of Iowa in the College of Public Health. I'm a former legislator. For 4 years, I chaired the Ag Committee. I chaired the Ag Committee in the Iowa House for 4 years. I have a degree in agricultural economics, so I know the industry pretty well. But where I really learned about it was back in 2002 when Tom Vilsack, our governor, did an interesting thing. Since figured he was the boss, he just said to the College of Public Health at my university, we want 20 of your professors to get together with 20 professors from the College of Agriculture and Engineering at Iowa State University. And we want you to talk about whether these CAFOs, which tend to smell pretty badly, are just a nuisance or if there's really a health effect. And we came out after 6 months and writing, 200-page book on it that we could at least say it might be. That's as far as we could go. We could not say certainly it's public health. But since 2002, there has been so much new information, including a paper that came out in January, authored by me and my former boss, the guy that used to be another emeritus professor, James Merchant, who was the dean of the College of Public Health. He's also a very big expert. He's one of these medical doctors who also has a PhD. He's a great researcher. And the new stuff that's out makes it much more likely that we can say that. It is a health effect. And mainly through air. It's airway diseases that you generally find. Asthma in one school where you're right next to a CAFO versus another school where you aren't, 2.5 times higher. There was some. That's one study in Iowa, done in Iowa. I know
JFAN
school.
In their yearly meetings brings up things like this
Yes.
quite constantly.
And well, so all I'm really doing is saying that the stuff that people think they know, they're right about. The other issue, of course, is what happens to the value of your property when one of these facilities moves in close to you. And you could talk to people and they'll say the value of my house went down, or you can look at research. When you look at research, it's the same thing, 25% reduction in property. Unless it happens to be downwind and close, and then it could be 88%. Good papers out there, good survey articles that say all of this. Now, and interestingly enough, one of those papers, and this was a recent article in a journal that I don't usually look at, but it's the Appraisal Journal, winter of 2015. One of the papers they looked at was survey articles, so they looked at dozens and dozens of papers, all showing a decrease in property values. One of them was done by Bereges, Sichi, and Bruce Babcock. I know Bruce at Iowa State University. Shown, like everybody else, that there's a decrease in your property value. But this is what that article said. They suggest that having the ability to bring suit might make the industry more accountable, and that nuisance suits may prove to be a powerful incentives to make CAFO's owners behave better. And then the legislature takes that away. It is... That's much of our problem, is that you could probably find solutions to this, but the Iowa legislature is not interested in solutions. They are interested in protecting the industry.
Yeah.
But also part of the problem is that, or at least in my opinion, and I don't know much at all, but, you know, if they didn't take the nuisance policy away and you could file, who has the money? You know, I mean, where do you get the money to file a very expensive? You take it to court. That's got to be fundraised, and it's an enormous amount of time and energy for people that have everyday lives to get on.
Once in a while, you get one of these cases where Iowa Select was sued in Iowa by 4 farm families, and they won $1 million. There's enough to pay the lawyer out of that. Mm-hmm. And then...
The lawyer got a big part of it.
Well, sure.
Yeah.
But the lawyer...
Yeah.
I mean, whether they get 30% or 40%, that is a lot of work.
Yeah.
And the best thing about that case, the last case, the jury gave them $32 million in punitives.
Wow.
Now, that was settled someplace. We have no idea what the final number was. I imagine it was over $1 million, since that was the normal stuff. But in order not to go on to court after court after court after court, and then that lawyer's certainly going to earn her money, they settled at some point. But that is what they're trying to do. Protect the industry when the industry, instead of wanting protection, ought to reform itself along the lines of Denmark. In my opinion.
Do you find, you're from the University of Iowa, when you get together with professors from Ames,
yeah,
are you kind of ignored, scorned, put in the corner, or what?
Well, no, I mean, first of all, in 2002, we worked very collaboratively, and Steve Hoff from Iowa State, an engineer, has come to the University of Iowa to present. We do some back and forth, and Steve was able to show that there are things you can do to reduce smell using local materials like straw, but it would cost more, probably. And so the industry just says, unacceptable.
Right.
And since the legislature is always behind them saying, you bet, go farmer, They don't call themselves farmers anymore. They call themselves producers. And I mean, we can all go through what has happened to this industry, which is the hogs are rarely owned by the person who's working in that hog house. They're somebody else's hogs, and he is the person, generally he, raising them and gets a per animal fee for doing that after he's built this giant facility that he's put out hundreds of thousands of dollars for. So there are lots of things why we shouldn't like this industry. And there'd be certainly ways in which we could come together and say, why can't you do it better, so that when people get wind of a new facility happening, you have 200 people at a meeting trying to say, how do we stop this thing? How do you want to be? Why would you want to be in that industry when you are so unpopular? And yet, that's exactly what they want. That's exactly what the owners of those hogs, the co-ops and the large facilities like Smithfield, like a few others, that's exactly what they say. Don't change anything. We're making lots of money as it is, and neighbors be damned. And that's what, so what I'm saying is not a lot of new stuff. We have this new paper, Jim Merchant and I, from January, and it's done by the Iowa Policy Project. I've always had two jobs. One is at the University of Iowa, and the other used to run this not-for-profit. I started this not-for-profit that puts out policy papers. And so ours is a policy paper that says, one, there are real health effects out there. It's not just air, it's also water, it's also nuisance, it's also what it does to somebody's head when they are just so angry all the time that they can't use their property. And look at some of the things that have gone on in Iowa, and I think that we are not making any progress right now. And the legislature that is in right now certainly is never going to do anything that a neighbor of one of these facilities wants. That's about all I have.
Have you ever been to the JFAN meetings down here?
I've not.
Oh, this is like what you said is said at higher decibel and for a longer time.
And that's true. I mean, I don't know more than what somebody out down here who lives in the area knows. All I can do is to say, what you just found out, there's evidence in the literature to verify what you're saying. And that's pretty much what Jim and I did in this paper.
Thank you.
Yeah, I'm afraid it is. And
well, I asked the DNR person about how long the reduction take.
the nutrient reduction strategy,
yeah.
Yes.
And he said, 40 years.
Yeah.
I'm going, what's the golf going to be like in 40 years?
Well, yeah, exactly. I would say it could even be 100 years if you take the rate at which they're getting cover crops down. And that was Bill Northey, the former Secretary of Agriculture's big goal is how much of this 24 million acres of corn and beans can we get covered with a cover crop? So there's something there for the rain to fall on, and something there to pull some of that nutrient out. And the rate would be 100 years. You know, even at 250,000 acres a year, 250, we get 1 million acres after 4 years. How long does it take to go from 1 to 24? I mean, even if we only wanted to have half, we're putting way beyond 40 years. And 250,000 acres is the farm that I don't believe. It's actually 64,000 you could measure. So, but again, you have to do what the industry says. Otherwise, you're somehow anti-agriculture. And if you're an Iowa State professor, you're in trouble.
Who do you think has the best hope the best hope for us right now. And,
What do you mean?
Well, I hear those figures and I just think, my granddaughter's, she's going to be starving to death.
Well.
I mean, what do you see as a positive thing to wake up to every morning in regard to what's being done that's working?
Yeah. Well, I think what's going on is more and more people coming to realize that they've got to do things differently. You've got to get a different legislature. I think it goes beyond having somebody come in and talk about the science. It's policy. You've got to change the policy. And in order to do that, you have to change a whole bunch of people. Probably not your local legislator.
Do we know what Ed Malloy's take on this is?
You should ask him.
I mean, you probably do. I don't.
He's
running on a water thing.
He's tread a careful path between the two segments of our community, but on the other hand, we're urban and the CAFOs are rural, so he can be a little more outspoken. I think he's spoken at CAFO things, but he's not a firebrand for the environmental movement in terms of the county and all that. Yeah.
No, I think that that's one of the solutions. I mean, more and more people are recognizing that this is not the only way to do things. There are lots of other ways that may help the environment, help neighbors. Come to do something with antibiotic resistance, because that, if you want to be scared about something, that's probably the most terrifying thing. And 70% of all antibiotics are used in animal agriculture, and they're not used for humans. Just like we're making those bugs tougher by not going through the entire regime of the medicine we're given, it's on purpose that you do prophylactic doses in the animal agriculture industry. Just make those bugs tougher.
Yeah,
Just
and it's
not
done always for disease. It just makes them gain weight faster.
It makes them gain weight. That's right.
Side effect is that we get stronger bugs.
Stronger bugs. Yeah. The new stuff out there from like the World Health Organization, which is really kind of a wussy bunch. They never take very strong statements, but read the stuff they're saying. Gee whiz. I mean, this post-apocalyptic era is nearly upon us.
I think it was the head of the World Health Organization said the age of antibiotics is over.
Yeah, well, that's very strong. There was an expert commission just put together last summer through CDC, and everybody who looks at this says we are in such trouble. But the industry won't change. And the FDA has something called advisory, first of all, advisory, number 213. And that says, why don't we all try to do better? And that's pretty much all it says. And they're starting to gather data, but they're really not doing it very well. And when you look at Denmark again, where antibiotics are used, why they're used, and not just in small hogs, market hogs, sows, but they break it down to weaners and newborns and all of those things. They just know where all that stuff is, and that again is what you're going to have to do if you want to protect the health of humans. It really is getting to be much, much worse. That might be the thing that gives me hope, is that the industry is going to go so far that finally they're on the branch and we're all sawing it off.
It's not just land-based CAFOs that are causing a lot of pollution and antibiotic problems. It's also the global fishing operations. Right. Like in Norway, there's a YouTube video called the world's most toxic food is produced in Norway on those fish farms, and there's photographs of guys standing in the lagoon. It's an enclosed lagoon within a large lake or something, and These guys are standing with hazmat suits on,
Oh, dear.
with hoses,
Oh, dear.
pumping extremely potent pesticides into the water that the fish are eating, and then it gets into their flesh, and that's what we eat. And they said that the Norway salmon are the most toxic food you can eat on the world.
Wow. You'd expect more of Norway.
And then there's Vietnam. There's all these fish farms are just horrendous. The Mekong Delta is incredibly polluted, and that's where a lot of the a significant part of the fish that we eat in Chinese restaurants comes from.
So
is areas like
plant-based
that.
diets.
Pardon?
Plant-based diets.
Yeah, well, that's what should be.
Right.
Anything
you can
else
get-
is not sustainable. Really.
Yeah, well, I think that cattle on grass, not too bad, as long as they don't get sent off to a feedlot afterwards. And even get some of those omega-6 out of that, apparently, for some reason. Where we
And unfortunately, it's also true that cows burping and farting creates a huge amount of methane too.
It does.
Yeah.
It does. And in feedlots, you might be able to do something on diets, but probably on grass-fed, it's grass, and that's methane. Yeah.
I've got a